Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that your most trusted asset is no longer yours. No warning, no debate, just a signature, and the government takes it. That's exactly what happened in 1933, when the U.S. government confiscated gold from its own citizens. It didn't require troops knocking on doors, just a stroke of the president's pen. Now, flash forward to today, silver has just been declared a strategic mineral by the U.S. government. And that simple designation changes everything. Silver isn't just an industrial metal anymore. It's now tied directly to national security, critical to the military, the power grid, and even the future of clean energy. But here's the thing. When the government says something is strategic, it doesn't mean it's protected. It means it can be controlled. So what happens if the government decides it needs your silver? What happens if they use the same playbook they did in 1933? Stay with me, because this isn't just speculation. The rules are already shifting, and you need to understand what that means for your silver. So what does this all mean? We're talking about a future where silver, your silver, could be seized, not through a dramatic raid, but through a shift in the law. Imagine this. A national emergency hits. Silver is suddenly deemed essential, and the government doesn't need to send a team to your door. They'll just announce it. Your private silver, now a public resource. Just like that, seized, frozen, flagged. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? That's because we tend to think these things only happen in movies. But the truth is the government already did this before, in 1933 with gold, and the mechanisms are still in place today. The question is, are you prepared if they decide your silver is now critical for national security? Because once the government redefines what's essential, it's game over. The rules will change, and it'll be too late to act. But here's the kicker. The public won't even know it's happening until it's too late. There won't be a press conference, no warning. It'll be hidden in a bill, buried in the details of a law no one reads. And by then, it's already done. The question you need to ask yourself is this: how much longer can silver stay off their radar? Here's the hard truth. Silver is now on the U.S. government's radar. And once something is labeled strategic, it's not just a resource, it's a target. It's no longer about the price of silver or whether it's used in electronics or jewelry. It's about national defense. Let's look at the facts. Just recently, silver was officially added to the critical minerals list. That means the U.S. government now considers it essential for defense, energy, and security. And if a crisis hits, whether geopolitical or otherwise, you can bet they won't hesitate to tap into those resources. You think silver is untouchable because it's an industrial metal? Think again. This move has already shifted silver from the shadows into the spotlight. And the question you should be asking now is, when will the government come for it? Notice what's missing in all of this? The debate. There's no discussion about whether this is the right thing to do. It's already happening, and no one's talking about it. It's all part of a much bigger game, one where your assets are collateral in the event of a crisis. And when the government needs resources, your private property could be the next target. It's already happened before, and it could happen again. Now, let's dig deeper. In 1933, the government seized gold to stabilize the economy during the Great Depression. But what people often forget is that it didn't stop there. In 1934, just a year later, the government turned its sights on silver. Under Executive Order 6814, the federal government authorized the seizure of silver from private citizens at a fixed rate, 50 cents an ounce. It wasn't a grand raid. It was a quiet legal move that didn't require breaking down doors. They just changed the rules. That's what's so chilling about this. It's not about force. It's about changing the laws, shifting the narrative until it's too late for you to react. The fear isn't in the government knocking on your door. The fear is in the moment they change the rules and take your wealth without you ever seeing it coming. And here's where this gets worse. You might think silver's untouchable. After all, it's been a precious metal for centuries. But in 1965, the U.S. government quietly removed silver from circulation by stripping coins of their silver content. They didn't send troops. They didn't confiscate your silver directly. They just made it worthless. The result, a slow, unnoticed disappearance of a valuable asset done by policy. That's confiscation by the finest definition, without violence, without resistance, just through legal and financial manipulation. So why does this matter today? Because it's not just about history repeating itself. It's about the very mechanisms that allowed gold and silver to be seized in the past, still being in place. The government already has the power to act, and silver has been reclassified as a critical resource. You don't think that gives them a lot of leverage? Think about it. If they needed access to silver for national defense or clean energy projects, would they hesitate to seize it? Here's where things take a darker turn. While the government revalued gold back in 1933, silver hasn't seen such a dramatic shift, but it doesn't have to. The infrastructure is already there. With silver being linked to everything from the military to green energy, it's not hard to imagine a scenario where they claim private silver for public use. The government doesn't need to come for it directly. They'll simply reframe it as a national security necessity. What's most disturbing here is the contradiction. On one hand, silver is labeled critical to the country's infrastructure. On the other, it's in your hands. Untouched, unprotected. And that's exactly how they'll come for it. Not with military force, but with a pen stroke and a change in policy. The narrative is already being written. All they need is the right moment to pull the trigger. Now, here's where things really start to stack up. First, we have silver being reclassified as critical for national security. That's a huge deal on its own. But then the government has the Defense Production Act at its disposal. This law gives the government authority to prioritize critical materials, including silver, in times of national emergency. It's not just a hypothetical. This is the exact kind of power the government used in past crises to control vital resources. Second, the demand for silver is already outpacing supply. We've been running a structural deficit for years, producing less silver than the world consumes. If a geopolitical crisis were to erupt tomorrow, how long before the government claims the silver it needs? With silver already critical for the power grid and defense, it's easy to imagine the government stepping in to take control of private holdings. And with the supply chain under pressure, do you really think they'd wait for the markets to fix themselves? Lastly, we have the undeniable fact that this has happened before. Time and time again throughout history, when the government needs something, it takes it. No violence, no raids, just a legal shift that redefines what you own and what they control. And once they have the legal power, there's no stopping it. So what happens if this continues? If the government keeps pushing for more control over critical resources like silver, what's next? You need to ask yourself, how much longer until your assets are no longer yours? Now, let's bring this closer to home. If you're watching this, it's because you understand how valuable silver can be, not just for investors, but for regular people. And this is where it gets real. Imagine your silver, the same asset that's been your backup plan for years, is suddenly no longer yours. Not because you lost it, but because the government claimed it for national security. This isn't just a theoretical situation. For millions of Americans who own silver, whether in coins, bars, or through their retirement accounts, the government's sudden power to seize resources would have a massive impact. Silver has been a store of value for centuries, and now it could be redefined as something the government can simply take when the need arises. So what happens to your savings if this actually goes down? What about families who rely on the value of their silver for security, for passing down wealth across generations? Imagine how they'd feel if all of that was suddenly erased by a change in policy. You might think this is far-fetched, but it's already happened before. And when people lose their wealth like this, it's not just financial, it's emotional too. If this feels familiar to you, or if you can relate to the idea of losing something you thought was safe, drop a comment below. We're all in this together. And sharing your thoughts might be the first step in understanding how real this threat is. Here's the part that's often missed. It's not just about the government seizing silver, it's about the system that makes it possible. The mechanisms in place that allow these types of confiscations to happen are far deeper than any individual event. It's about leverage, incentives, and fear, and most importantly, it's about the power of the narrative. You see, the government doesn't need to resort to brute force. All they need is the right narrative. In 1933, the government used the Great Depression as the excuse to seize gold. Today, we're seeing the same kind of narrative building around national security and the importance of critical resources. It's all about framing the issue in a way that the public accepts it as necessary for the greater good. Once that narrative takes hold, no one questions the next steps. The truth is, our system relies on a balance of fear and compliance. When a crisis arises, governments gain unprecedented power. The Defense Production Act, for instance, is a legal tool that essentially lets the government bypass traditional legal protections for private property in the name of national security. Once the public buys into the idea that silver is essential for defense or energy, it's a short leap to justify seizing private holdings to ensure the nation's security. And when the rules change, so does your wealth. What's unsettling about all this is how normal it feels. We're so used to hearing about national emergencies and crises that the idea of assets being seized in the name of national security barely raises an eyebrow anymore. But that's exactly how it happens. Slowly, quietly, and with the support of a narrative that shifts the lines between what's private and what's public. So what happens next? We're at a crossroads, and there are two very different paths that this could take. The first, the government steps in and the shift towards nationalization continues. If silver keeps growing in importance for defense, energy, and clean technology, the government could step up their control even further. We could see more regulations, more restrictions, and in the worst case, silver could be seized once again, just like gold was back in 1933. The precedent is already set, and the infrastructure to make this happen is in place. But there's another possibility. Maybe this whole thing will blow over. Maybe the government won't need silver after all, and the panic over its reclassification will turn out to be an overreaction. Maybe silver remains as it is, valuable, but not critical. But here's the thing. We can't know for sure, and that's the problem. The uncertainty itself is a powerful force. The momentum is building, whether we like it or not. The government is pushing for more control over critical resources, and silver is in their sights. The next move could happen at any time, and when it does, it's likely to happen fast. So whether you think this is an overblown concern or a real threat, one thing is clear. The future of silver is far from certain. Here's the final truth you need to grasp. The rules are changing, whether we're ready or not. The silver you've trusted as a secure asset could soon be redefined by forces beyond your control. The government has the power, the tools are in place, and if history is any indication, your wealth isn't as safe as you think. The bottom line, wealth is never truly yours until you control it, and even then, you need to be aware of the system around you. When the narrative shifts, so does your reality. It's a Dan.